Right. Our next and final speaker of today is Rahqi, and he's going to talk about the iRODS testing environment web application he's been working on this summer.
Hello guys, my name is Rahqi Sarsour. A few fun facts about a few fun facts about me. I'm a student at UNC, majoring in computer science with a minor in neuroscience and math. And just a quick fun fact about me, I have eaten 106 pieces of sushi in one sitting. I actually went back earlier today for lunch. I only ate 70. It's a little disappointing, but I've done it before. Maybe we'll do it again. We'll see. So to first give some background on the original testing environment, VA. It is a command line application. It was used to test just different features of iRODS, of federation, stand-ups, topology plugins, unit and core components, and some features that it had was allowing for parallel testing and setting up, being able to test against different iRODS versions, as well as a variety of Linux operating systems like Ubuntu and CentOS. However, some limitations of it is that it lacked a use of a test history. And as it became more complicated with more features, it just became time consuming to use and not overall as user-friendly, just because of how complex it became as having to configure, run the test all throughout the command line. So what we wanted to do was try to simplify the use of the testing environment. First, we looked at a variety of CI and CD tools. In the past, before the testing environment was created, a lot of the testing for iRODS used to run on Jenkins. So that was an original go-to of trying to look at. However, going back and looking through some features of Jenkins, its configurations, we realized it would also be a bit too complex. And GitHub Actions also didn't feel like it had fit our needs for what we wanted to test within to simulate the testing environment we had created. So ultimately, we ended up landing on Buildbot. It just had a simple and clean UI, as well as just basic configurations of build steps and workers, and being able to just test our configurations as relatively easy. And as you can see here, it just allowed for streaming output. So the output was just live as we were running the test, and you could have just gotten up from your laptop or machine, get coffee. You didn't have to be on standby, constantly shaking your mouse or keypad, and it would just run nice. And yeah, but some problems that it had was it involved a lot of manual configurations. So in order for this to actually have been useful for testing iRODS, we would have had to set up a large combination of workers and test, which just would have rendered unnecessary, as some features just aren't as prominent or as useful as having to keep testing against others. And if we didn't want to do that, it would just involve constant reconfiguration, which we would end up, it's a little small, but ultimately it would just end up running the same text that we would run inside a command line, but instead it would just be a Python, a string, and it would just become a bit redundant to what we were already doing. So this involved some redirectioning, and ultimately we settled on creating an interface to our own liking that would be nice, user-friendly, clickable, and it would just still involve a lot of similar tools that Jenkins and Buildbot had, such as a test history and being able to actually view the test log results. So, and this ultimately was the design schema for the web app. So the web app really somewhat consisted of two components, the API and the user interface. The user interface is just, again, that clickable, nice area where we could configure the test, we can view the status of the test, and as well as view the logs. It would fetch everything from the API. So the API was coded up in Node.js. It would just try to, for any test configurations, it would actually parse to create the Python script that it would send to the original testing environment and run. The original testing environment will then send the results of the test back up to the API, as well as sending the location of the log files. The API would then store the log files and test results in its own separate JSON files, and just present the overall results to the user interface. Some problems faced was being able to handle requests asynchronously. Originally, the functions were running in asynchronous manner in Node.js, but this ended up slowing down the web app. And if we had asynchronous functions within our synchronous functions, the synchronous functions would just sort of skip over those components. So the way we had to resolve this was being able to utilize callback functions. And at times, as the example provided, there was just multiple nested callback functions within one another to be able to make sure we were fetching the results properly and in a reasonable and time-friendly manner. And another problem faced was just the design implementation of the testing history. It really just came down to whether or not we wanted to use just a real or like sort of quasi database that would sit on the user's machine, or a separate JSON file that would just store the log locations or other results that we didn't know what to store entirely. So this also became what is the contents that we wanted to store and where to handle it. Do we just let the React front end of the user interface handle everything in terms of the results, or do we let the API handle it behind the scenes? Ultimately, we just let the I let the API just send everything off behind the scenes, just because it would create less rendering problems with React on the front end. And now time for a demo. Ooh. So as you can see, this is the iRODS testing environment. We can test, currently, we can test core test, topology, and unit tests. And I believe Federation plugin tests are not currently available to test, but that's been a future work in progress. So if, let's say we set like run core tests, and let's say test ILS, we can also choose from one or multiple tests. And again, we have different operating systems and the different databases, Postgres, SQL, and whether or not we wanted to test a package directory, and we would specify any package directory on our machine, or the package iRODS version. Here, I'm just going to pick 4.2.11, and the type of verbosity. Even though the verbosity, you can technically choose no verbosity, I chose to make it so that you have to choose one, just because in reality, when testing, it's almost a very rare occasion to not test with extra debugging features. So as you can see, it would give run test, and we can go here. If we press test history on the bottom, you'll be presented with a screen like this, and we can actually refresh this page. And you can see that the current test we're running has a pending status, yellow. Any tests that are red is failed test, and we actually have multiple pages here. And any tests that are green, obviously are tests that passed. You can see the different files we ran. It's organized by time in increasing or decreasing order. And test ILS will continue to run. But if we wanted to view the results of like past tests, it would look something like this. It would actually give us our test results and the location where tests are stored. And we can actually view the test files on hand. We'll just display an XML file, and we can choose to close everything entirely to make it still nice and portable. So, sorry, I have one more slide. Okay, some future improvements I had was being able to run multiple tests simultaneously, and being able to allow streaming output. Originally, when we had synchronous functions running, it was streaming live output. This may just be a nice feature if we needed to kill a test at a certain moment, as we're seeing that something is failing. right now, there is a cancel test feature already, so it is nice. But we still, if you want to know what's happening behind the scenes, it would just be better to have that string output, and to configure plugin test would again be a feature improvement on the testing environment. Any questions?
So if I have the web application and I launch a test using the Python script, the Python scripts, right?
Yes.
Outside of the GUI,
Okay.
will this pick up those results?
No, it will not. So as of now, the user interface does run independently of the original iRODS testing environment. They do not run synchronously together. However, this also allows for if two users of the testing environment were testing different components, they don't have overlapping test results.
Okay.
So it allows for the two independent people on their own machines to not be it would be useful at times to view testing results, but it would also get cluttered. So it also allows for you to view your own testing results at your own time.
So basically, if I have this, the tests that it runs are separately maintained than tests I run using my own
Correct.
clone of the testing environment.
Correct.
Okay.
Can you run multiple instances of the GUI or?
So I can run multiple instances of the GUI on separate tabs. My current machine is a bit too fragile, so but I have tested it in the past. That does work.
If you ran one test on a different test on each one, would that work? Or
Yes.
it would? Okay.
In theory, it should work. We would have. I've tested it a handful of times. Again, it has crashed sometimes, but it would the result would look like there's two pending tests. But one thing that can cause hiccups is just, let's see if we can see that this test is correct passed, would just be, it would just cause the machine to slow down. So especially fragile machine.
So you showed an example where you can select what tests you choose.
Mhm.
Where exactly does that information come from? Is it just from it's hard coded in, or is it from the information come from your current directories, or where?
Yeah, so as of now, when you select a Python file test that you want to run, I'll delete this for instance. Let's say we want to run unit core test. It actually, the React app on the user front, on the user interface, will read that user input and actually gather a JSON file of possible unit tests that you can run. So on older versions, some of these tests may be broken, may not work. So there is that possibility of that occurring. But it is all, I guess, on the user and would have to be updated as of now manually.
Are there any other questions?
So in our little Python test files, there's multiple tests in the test suite. If we wanted to run a specific test from one of those files, is there a way to do that through this, or you just have to run all the tests in the file? So those test names there, those are if you switch back to the core tests.
Okay.
And in the other than test names there, those are all different files that we have.
Yes.
But each of those files have individual
A
tests
subtest
within them.
unit
Yeah.
test. As of now, we'll run the entire file.
Okay.
So
That's a feature enhancement.
that could be a feature enhancement to test certain unit tests within each of these.
Excellent.
I have one question. Good job so far. The question is about the most surprising thing that happened or that you learned. It may have been both, but what was the most surprising thing this summer?
I'd say ultimately the most surprising part had to have been I guess trying to configure the API portion of the application. Just because that involved reading a lot of documentation within Node.js on how to run just like different command strip, run like command line applications through Node and through Node functions. So I hadn't really had much familiarity with that. I've done different like web scraping stuff in the past and like opening files automatically through different small applications that I've built, but on a large scale to be able to run like a sub process through like some JavaScript and just like a conglomerate of the testing environment at a time was I believed it was an impressive feat on my end. Even though I guess it might be small in the grand scheme of things, but to me it was just a really cool thing to see work.
So it was surprising because it was more in depth than you expected it to be.
Correct.
Yeah. Very good. Thanks.